Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6 Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the Baofeng UV-21R. The UV-21R kind of came onto my radar right after I reviewed the UV-17R, and there were a lot of things about the UV-17R I liked. Big changes in the world of Baofeng in terms of their operating system. No longer did we have the, monochrome LCD display, 128 channel capacity, and on and on. They came and gave us a really nice dark colored display, 999 memory channel count, a little bit better build quality, but they didn't really go up in the price above what a typical UV5R would cost you. And that's a nice departure, and I can see how they're evolving as a company. I don't know if they'll ever discontinue the UV5R, but I can't really think of any reason to buy one in this current world when radios like this exist. If this is the market share, if this is the kind of radio you're in the market for, something that's an entry-level, very inexpensive radio, Baofeng has much better stuff to offer than the UV5R nowadays. And at the time, I thought that was the UV-17R. But right away, I had people in the comments section telling me, hey, you really need to take a look at the UV-21R. It's everything the UV-17R is, but better in a number of important ways. And they were right. They were very, very correct. So I'm going to go over some of the basic features of the UV-21R, and right away you'll see the major departures that I'm talking about. So to begin with, we've got an analog HT here that's VHF, UHF, but it's VHF in a more important way than the 17R is. Now, where the 17R is a radio that's locked into the amateur radio band if you're using the ham radio version, and that's going to be 144 to 148 megahertz for transmit, and the receive 136 to 174, and then locked into the ham band for UHF as well. And that's kind of it with the 17R. But the first big departure with the 21R is this is in fact a analog tri-band radio, in that, and follow along with me here, because this is another interesting departure, because a lot of folks that have the 17R, one of the things that they're a little disappointed about is there's no known unlock code so that you can do expanded transmit. So you're locked in to the amateur radio band. But the UV-21R, this one is I received from Amazon, and I purchased this myself with my own funds off of Amazon, and I'll provide a link in the description. But this is Amazon, not Alibaba. I didn't have to bring it in from China. This radio came to me from Amazon, able to do the following. On VHF 1, it will transmit and receive from 136 to 174 megahertz. So it's unlocked. It came that way. I didn't have to put a code in. That is how I received it. Then there's VHF 2, which is going to be, and of course VHF 1 is going to be your 2 meter amateur radio band, but VHF 2 is your 1.25 meter amateur radio band, and that's going to be transmit and receive from 220 to 260 megahertz. So 1.25 meter. And then of course there's the UHF band, and in UHF band it transmits and receives from 400 to 520 megahertz. So again, fully unlocked. So you can utilize this as a ham radio, but also have the availability to run GMRS frequencies through it, as well as things like MERS frequencies. So right there is a huge step away from the 17R in terms of capability, and it addresses one of the major deficiencies with the 17R that a lot of people see, like I say, not being able to unlock it. Now, like the rest of the radios in this new operator series, or this new operating system, sorry, I tangled up there, this has 999 memory channels, but and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, no zones or banks to organize those 999 memory channels into smaller usable chunks, which is a deficiency that they corrected that with the 17 Pro GPS. They have zones, but even then their system is a little troubled, but at least it's an attempt. So you will find that while this does have 999 memory channels, you're going to have to set a lot of those up as skip, which is okay, I suppose. But I wish they would take that step and give us some kind of zone system like Ocean has, or the Anytone radios, so that you can organize those into smaller chunks. But moving on. So we've got, we talked about the transmit receive range. Another step up above the 17R is this is IP54 rated. Now, that's not an extreme amount of weather and dust protection. However, it's better than nothing. At least they say this will stand up to a light rain and it will resist some dust intrusion, both of which can be killers on radios. So I wouldn't take this out in a driving thunderstorm, and I certainly wouldn't submerge it, but it's good in a light rain. So that's a step in the right direction for an outdoor radio. Now, the price is another thing that's amazing. I paid $29.99 for this radio, so it is 1 penny short of $30, which for what you get is, I still am amazed by that. Now, with a $30 radio come a lot of compromises and a bit of a gamble, because as with any Baofeng, when you buy it, and I get this every time I do an inexpensive radio video, invariably I will have someone jump into the comments section and tell me how they bought one, it was junk and it didn't work. That happens when it comes to Baofeng. Baofeng is not known for outstanding quality control. That's why I always recommend buy them off of Amazon. And that's one of the problems with, people want to buy these things in an unlocked state, or have the ability to unlock them, but that often forces them to buy from overseas, places like Alibaba and Banggood and all that. And the problem with there always is their return policies are shady and shifty at best. And oftentimes people will get stuck with a broken radio and there's no way to return it. But as I said, I bought this off of Amazon. If I buy it off of Amazon and it doesn't work, I box it up and I send it back and get a refund or get another one sent to me. It's that simple. So that's why I try whenever possible to buy from Amazon if I'm buying an inexpensive radio. And as I said, this one from Amazon comes unlocked. Now, I don't know how long that state will perpetuate itself, but that's my experience with this particular one. I'd like to see in the comments section other people that have bought these off of Amazon, if theirs too came fully expanded, I'm looking for a better term there, but if it has the same capability to transmit out of band, that would be interesting to find out. Now, let's see if there's anything else I can go through. I'll cover any of the other issues as I kind of do the usual circuit around the radio, but we'll go ahead and start with that now. At the top, of course, we've got our on-off volume control knob. Pretty simple there. There's no protection on the knob. Sometimes they come with a little bit of built-up protection on the side. This doesn't have it. There's the required at this point, apparently, if you make a Baofeng, there's the light on the top. Of course, we have the antenna. Now, it comes with an antenna that is looks very similar to what we used to call the old counterfeit Nagoya antennas, but Baofeng has been using this particular type of antenna on their radios for a while now. Now, let's see how it's marked here. See if I can get these 136, 174, 400 to 520. So this does not indicate that it's going to be any good as a tri-band antenna, and I can tell you from my experiences using this antenna, it's not. It'll make it, but it's got a high SWR when you attempt it. So if you really want to exploit the tri-band capability of this radio, you're probably going to want to look into a tri-band antenna for this. And if you do, just so you know, when you're purchasing the antenna, this is on the antenna side, it is an SMA female. On the radio side, it is an SMA male, center conductor pin being on the radio itself. So if you're looking for one of those antennas, they are out there and you can find them. So if you're looking to upgrade for a little better transmit capability, that would be advisable. Now, moving on to the side of the radio, of course, we have our PTT. Nothing surprising there. We do have 3 function control buttons on here, but these are not programmable. You are stuck with what you got. One controls the FM radio and Monty capability. One controls the flashlight. Well, let's go ahead and see what it controls. See if I can remember this properly. So when we All right, we press that button and we get our FM radio, and you can tell from the speaker, pretty loud. It's got, I believe it's a 1-watt speaker. Don't hold me to that, but it is good and loud. I can definitely confirm that. Now the center button, when I press that, activates the light. When I press it again, gives me a strobe. When I press it again, it turns it off. And then our third button here at the bottom isn't doing anything. Whoa, that's super annoying. Okay, that's your alarm, which I absolutely hate on these radios, and there's no way to disable it, unfortunately. You can set it to do a couple of different things. One thing you definitely want to set on this is whether this is local or whether that alarm is transmitted. You definitely want your alarm to be local. You don't want that to go over the air. Now, moving to the front of the radio, let's talk about that display. Again, very similar to, well, not very similar, absolutely identical to the UV-17R. Dark background, light colored lettering. Now, some people like the dark display, some people don't. I'm kind of ambivalent on it, but I will say outside, like all dark displays, it's hard to see. It's extremely hard to see, and that's unfortunate. But indoors, it's excellent because it's not blinding you. You can set your display up for different timeouts on that, so it's either on all the time or it darks out after a certain number of seconds. Now the display, like I said, we have our same as the UV-17R. This is going to have an A area and a B area, and that is controlled, of course, with the AB button right here, and there will be a little red arrow that's going to indicate which particular effective area you're in, and that's going to determine when you press the PTT which area you're going to be transmitting on. But as displays go, it's a step up, I suppose, from the old amber background, but I gotta say I didn't mind that one all that much. So I don't know how these displays are going to evolve over time, if eventually they might get into something that has a little lighter background for people to be able to see, but we'll see how the trends go on that. Now, moving down to the front panel, you've got a little bit of a departure from what you normally see for your channel control and navigation keys. Now, normally we're used to the little up-down arrow keys that are right below the speaker grill on this one, and same with the UV-17 series. Just beneath the display, we've got our little up-down arrow keys. But here we've got something that looks like it's pinched off of some of the more expensive radios. Of course, if you're familiar with something like ICOM ID51 Alpha, Anytone ATD 878, they've got this nice little circle ring in the center, and this usually is accompanied by the center button having a number of different functions. But if you press that arrow down, of course it navigates through the channels, and then when you're in the menu, you're going to use that also to navigate the menu. One thing I was hopeful for was that the center button did something, and you can press it all day. It's clicky. There's definitely a button there, but it's not hooked up to anything. It doesn't do a single function on the radio. What I would have loved to have seen is for that to be maybe the scan button. That would have been kind of nice to start and stop scan, or who knows. And maybe they have something planned with another radio in the future for that. Who's to say? Your green button is going to be your entrance into your menu, and then of course from there you can use the up-down arrow key to cycle through the menu. When you get to an item you want to change or adjust, you just simply let's find one it isn't going to mess too much up here. Yeah, let's go here. If I wanted to make an adjustment here, I would just simply press the menu again, and then I can cycle through my menu to what I want. If I don't want to do anything at all, I can press the exit key, or I press the menu key again, and that'll select that, and then I can move on to something else. But like I said, if you want to exit the menu at any point, press the blue key, and you're out. Below the green key, of course, we have our VFO and our memory mode key. So if you want to cycle between VFO and memory, you can use that. The AB button, of course, I discussed that already. And of course, we have our keys down here. Scan is going to be your lower right-hand button, the little pound key with the Zorro sign. That would, of course, start scan. Long press on that gets you rolling. And you'll see it cycles through a couple of different things on the display. For simplex channels or frequency mode, you have those nice larger characters, but any named channel is going to be the smaller font. It's something that a lot of people really don't like. They really did a good job on the font for the simplex stuff, but they really did a awful job with the lettering. It's looks kind of cheap, to be honest with you, but it gets the job done. One thing I've noticed is that the scan rate seems to be slightly faster than what I'm used to with Baofengs, which is nice. So if you want to exit scan, you just simply short press that key again and you're good to go. Not much else to talk about in the display. It's pretty easy to figure out and sort out. So we'll move to the other side of the radio, and we have our typical speaker mic port cover, and this is like a lot of import Chinese radios. It's going to be a Baofeng type, or well, let's say it right. It's a Kenwood K1 plug set, but it's what Baofeng has been using forever and a day. They do have some departures from that, where they go with a contact strip instead of the plug set, but it's your typical 3.5 and 2.5 millimeter plugs, spaced a certain way, and again, it's Kenwood K1 type. So if you've got Baofeng speaker mics or speaker mics you use with other Chinese radios, you're going to be good to go. And of course, this is not half bad on this cover. No screws to undo, and of course, it does provide a little bit of weather protection. Like I said, this is IP54 rated. Now, moving to the back of the radio, we've of course got our belt clip. Typical stuff there. They've done a much better job with their belt clips on this new series of radios. The pin is staked and it's a little more durable setup. It is connected to the battery though, so it's something to keep in mind if you buy spare batteries for these, and the spare batteries for these are only like 10 bucks. Now, one thing that will be a bit of a challenge for you though, I like it and don't like it, but it's okay. The way they secure the battery now in these newer Baofengs is, I call it caveman style, but it works. I mean, it works a lot better than a lot of other battery latches on these radios, where you drop the radio and the battery flies off or the latch gives way. But this is secured with a giant screw, which they call a fastening screw, which I thought is an odd terminology, but they call it that nonetheless. But it secures down. Now, I would take the battery off at this point and flip it over and show you what the milliamp hour rating is on the battery. But here's something that was a bit of a puzzlement for me. Nowhere on the battery is the milliamp hour rating listed. But also, nowhere in the manual, for which they call it a BF21 in the manual, it's not listed in the manual either. Then I went to the vendor where I purchased this, and I could not find a milliamp hour rating for the battery there. I finally had to do a Google search for spare batteries for this radio before I could finally find what the milliamp hour rating is on a battery. All it says on the battery is high output battery or high capacity battery, something like that. But what I was finally able to determine is this is a 2600 milliamp hour battery. Being that it's a fairly large radio, no surprise there, but that should be sufficient. I can tell you that these new Baofeng radios, boy, do they hold a charge for a long, long, long time. And I'll tell you that because I charged up this UV-21 Pro GPS. I believe I charged this up about 6 months ago. And when I turn it on, it shows 8 volts. That's kind of phenomenal, actually. I'm used to Baofengs of the UV-5R variety not being able to hold a charge for any more than a couple of weeks. And the worst offender of those are the extendo batteries for the UV-5R that are all the rage, or have been for the past few years. I have some of those that won't hold a charge for more than a couple of days. They're not a good system. This is much better. They're doing better with the technology there, so kind of impressive, actually. Now, what this is provided with, one last feature too, of course, USB-C charging. Let's pop this open here. Not half bad. So you got USB-C charging capability, and it does come with a USB-C charging cord, but it also came with a charge cradle, and it came with an extra antenna. I was turning around to see if I had the antenna there, but it does come, at least this one came with an extra whip antenna. It too is not a tri-band antenna. But that's a nice little extra touch. The only downside is they put it in the small box that it comes in, and they kind of coil it up. But it's stretched out okay, just fine. Now, let me talk about one negative feature about this radio that I don't like. It's a minor little nitpick, but I'm going to warn you ahead of time. Now, if you look at the bottom of a UV-17R, nice wide flat surface, And if you look at the bottom of even the big boy UV-5R, again, nice wide flat surface. But I guess for style points, they made the contact area at the bottom fairly small. And I will tell you, this thing is super wobbly. If you just brush against this thing, it will fall over. You might find that a little annoying. It's a little teeny tiny nitpick, I know, but it's just something that I get irritated by it. I have a couple of radios that are like that. I believe my FT60 is like that. It's got a bad habit of falling over as well. It's just a small thing, but just thought I'd tell you about it. It's definitely not something that I would say would preclude me from wanting to buy this radio, to be honest with you. It does come in a number of different colors that I like. You've got the green, which I have a nice growing collection of green Baofeng radios. They also have one that's in a nice gray color, and I want to say I think the third color is orange. Not totally sure on that, but there are some options in terms of colors. But for a $30 radio, again, I talk about these less expensive radios because I do fully understand that there are people that when they're just getting into the radio game, they don't really want to throw a heck of a lot of money at that. And some people view that as sort of an illogical approach, but I got to tell you, I do it myself in a lot of ways. When I got back into radio-controlled aviation as a hobby, I didn't start out with a $600 plane. I started out with a little cheap $89 plane that I bought off of Amazon. I just wanted to see if I was going to enjoy the hobby. Now I have a lot of very expensive planes. Just got back into mountain biking, and rather than go out and buy a $4,000 bike, instead I bought a $400 bike. Now that's $400 still a lot of money, but when you're talking mountain bikes, they can get super expensive super fast. I tell you this only to say, don't shame people for wanting to look into these less expensive radios, because there's a valid concern for that. There's also some people out there that just don't have a heck of a lot of cash, so they're looking for good deals and good bargains. Now this one is pretty much going to fill that role, but I got to now give you the bad news, and this relates to the last video that I put out. And that last video I put out, I talked about the new spectrum analyzer that I purchased, and I promised that all radio reviews I do moving forward, I would definitely do a spurious emissions test. And while I'm talking about that, let me give you my other testing as well, because another thing that I test on these radios every time is I test the power output. And I haven't talked about power output up to this point, but this is in the advertising literature, they say this is a 5-watt radio. In the manual, they say this thing is rated for 5 watts. So let me first give you my power output test, and then I'm going to talk about spurious emissions. So for power output, I test usually using a set of frequencies or channels that are consistent from one radio to another. So let me give you my first reading. This would be VHF1, so this would be the 2-meter band, and I tested on 146.415, and I got a solid 5 watts. On VHF2, which of course is going to be our 1.25 meter band, I tested on 223.400 megahertz, and I got 5.2 watts. 5.2 watts on 1.25 meter. That's been a bugaboo for me for a while. Seems every single radio I get that claims to be a tri-band puts out a lower output wattage, sometimes dramatically lower, but this thing does a full 5.2 watts on 1.25 meters, so that's good. And then we move on to UHF. I test 441.000, and there I got 5 watts. So this thing is as advertised. Now let's talk about GMRS frequencies. Channel 1, Channel 8, and Channel 15. Test all 3 spectrums, and it was 4 watts even across the board. So you're down a watt when you move to GMRS. But that's typical for a lot of radios. I have Yaesus that struggle to do 4 watts on any channel, so that's not half bad. So power output, good to go. Now, the bad news. Spurious emissions. Not as bad as, well, it's bad in one area. How about that? But it didn't fail across the board. So let me talk first about VHF1. So this is 2 meter. I tested on 146.415, and my first harmonic off of the fundamental was 32.7 dB. Now that fails the test. The test says that it needs to be 40 or greater. So anything closer than 40 is a fail, so it would fail a spurious emission test. Now, is basically 7.3 dB failure enough? Again, this will be for you to determine, but that applies to this particular radio. Your radio may test out different, but it did in fact fail on one of those tests. Now, when we moved to UHF, the first harmonic off the fundamental was 44 dB, so it passes the test. It's greater than 40. And then on 1.25 meter at 223.400, I got 56.0 dB off the fundamental. So that's much better. But just know in one band, this actually didn't pass the test. To what degree that is going to be problematic, or whether or not that'll affect your buying decision, I'll leave to you, but that is the result. So that's really kind of all I have to say about this particular radio. I like it. As an inexpensive $29.99 radio, 1 cent less than 30 bucks. It represents a good value, and I really like the build quality. It's got a great feel to it, great styling. And one other thing I'll mention, I like how they're starting to get into kind of widening the radio at the top to sort of protect the PTT when this thing is in a pouch. It gives you kind of a little cutout here for the PTT. I wish more radio companies would do that and understand that not everybody carries on a belt clip. A lot of people do use pouches, and the PTT is by no means extra sensitive. It is hinged at the bottom, so you have to press directly at the top. So that does put it in the deepest part of this void, so it will be protected inside of a pouch. So I really like that. And it's, like I said, it's a good looking radio too. It definitely looks way more than it actually costs at retail. So with that, I will bring this review to an end. Thank you for watching and or listening. Again, I'll leave links in the description to where I bought this from Amazon if you're interested yourself. And with that, I'll say thanks for, again, thanks for watching and listening. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee from Visalia, California. Have a wonderful day.